They called her dead weight. Not to her face, never directly, just loud enough for the echo to do the work. Major Ariel Voss moved like a ghost through Hawthorne base, sorting ammunition crates and checking labels no one cared about. Her fatigues bore no special patch. Her name held no rank. Just another cautionary tale in boots. Some said she froze during a mission in Eastern Europe. Others swore she disobeyed direct orders and cost lives. None of them really knew. She never answered. Silence had long become her armor. But one morning, under the humming fluorescence of the supply depot, as she reached overhead for a case of signal flares, her sleeve slipped. A tattoo, black, geometric, precise, etched across her upper arm. Private Hall paused mid-step. The shape was unfamiliar, too sharp for art, too structured for ego. Not a memory, not a mistake. A mark. One not meant to be seen. Not yet. You think you know what failure looks like? Stay with this story till the end, because what she's about to reveal will challenge everything they thought they knew and maybe everything you believe about honor. Let us know in the comments. Have you ever seen someone misjudged and stayed silent? And if stories like this matter to you, don't forget to subscribe. We tell the truths others try to bury. They didn't hate her, not exactly. Hatred took effort. Ariel Voss didn't inspire that much thought. What she drew was quieter smirks passed in the hallway, shared glances across the mess line, offhand remarks barely masked as jokes. Ghost gear handlers on the move. She's still on probation, or did they just forget to fire her? Don't drop that crate, Voss. Wouldn't want another incident. The barbs weren't aimed to pierce, just to exclude. Mockery disguised as banter, soaked in indifference. And Ariel, as always, said nothing. She moved through the base with surgical precision. Repetitive tasks, done perfectly. Labels aligned, rifles cleaned. No complaints, no questions. She clocked in, did the job, and vanished behind the metal walls of the depot like a shadow returning to its corner. But silence, no matter how strong, wears thin. Private Hall was the loudest among the junior ranks. Newly transferred, cocky in the way soldiers get when they've survived enough to feel invincible but not enough to understand the cost. He saw Ariel as a harmless curiosity, a disgraced major turned box counter. Easy prey. She's like some cryptid, he joked at the firing range. Shows up near ammo stacks, never talks, never blinks. Bet she used to be somebody, Corporal Jace added. Or thought she was. They laughed. No venom, just that careless laughter that turns a person into a ghost before they've even left. Lieutenant Cole Mercer overheard it from the next bay. He didn't join in, but he didn't stop it either. His curiosity had been growing ever since he saw the edge of her tattoo in that grainy video someone had shared. A quick clip, Ariel lifting a weapons case, the ink flashing under pale light. The image haunted him. He'd seen something like it once, not in training, not in manuals. In a file. A locked drawer. An emblem listed under Tier Black Mission Denied. He couldn't recall the name of the operation. Most of the file had been redacted anyway, but the lines, those angles, they didn't look decorative, they looked assigned. Cole made a mental note to check again. Quietly. Meanwhile, the whispers grew. Rumor said Ariel had frozen during a cross-border recon in Moldova, let her unit walk into an ambush. Others swore she'd assaulted a commanding officer and got buried in paperwork instead of prison because of old favors. 2 demotions, no deployments in 4 years, one soldier muttered. Probably has dirt on someone high up, another replied. None of them noticed the way her eyes flicked toward them and then away. Not with anger, not with fear, with tired accuracy like a sniper scanning for wind. At chow, she sat alone at the table near the loading bay doors, her tray untouched, her boots always clean. She read the MRE instructions like they might change. No one joined her, no one invited her in, not anymore. And then came the moment. During a routine inventory drill, she shed her jacket in the heat. The arm lifted, the sleeve rolled. The tattoo emerged dark, angular, too sharp for fashion. It stretched from mid-bicep toward her shoulder, framed like it had been placed there deliberately. Assigned. Private Hall froze mid-laugh. Whoa, what is that? No answer. Looks like a phoenix? No, wait, that's not a bird, that's something else. Before anyone could ask again, she pulled the sleeve down. But it was too late. The image was already captured in 3 different phones. One of them belonged to Corporal Jace. Another, quietly, was Mercer's. The photo would make its way into inboxes, group chats, comment threads. And for the first time in years, someone started to wonder who Ariel Voss really was. The image spread like wildfire, though no one called it that. No one tagged her name. No caption, just a picture. The curve of Ariel Voss's arm, pale under fluorescent light, cut by black ink that looked more like a cipher than a tattoo. In the barracks group chat, the comments came quickly. That's some Black Ops badge? She draw that herself, with a ruler? Bro, that's gotta mean something. Geometric Phoenix? Looks official. Theories stacked up. None landed. Lieutenant Cole Mercer stared at the image longer than he'd like to admit. It nagged at something buried deep in his early SOCOM rotation, when he was still a lieutenant's aide with limited clearance and too much time. He remembered pulling inventory files at a base in Sicily, boxes stamped with a similar angular emblem. The crate labels had no names, just a designation, Operation Ivory Gate, Tier Echo Black. He didn't have access to the mission itself, just the crate logs. But he remembered the warning that came with them. If you see this emblem and don't know what it means, you don't need to. And now, it was on her arm. Meanwhile, Ariel returned to her routine like nothing had changed. She stacked field radios in cold silence, cleaned a belt-fed Mark 48 so methodically it gleamed like showroom glass, logged every item, every number, by hand her own system, precise beyond regulation. Outside her depot, the murmurs thickened. She still won't talk about it. Maybe it's fake. Or some cult thing. Nah, man. No one fakes something that weird. That's classified level ink. By week's end, it wasn't just whispers. It was performance. Ariel walked into the equipment shed one afternoon to find the whiteboard covered in stick figure drawings, crude cartoons of her, cape and all, with exaggerated tattoos and speech bubbles saying, "Top secret. I'm nobody." She erased it with a rag and said nothing. That same night, a message pinged her secure phone, the one she hadn't touched in nearly a year. Saw the ink. You knew they'd notice eventually. Unknown number. She stared at it for a long time before responding. They see, but they don't understand. Flashbacks came in fragments now. The whir of rotor blades, the hiss of a broken comms unit, blood leaking from the armor of someone whose name she couldn't say aloud. Ivory Gate hadn't been a mission, it had been a trap. 6 operators dropped behind enemy lines to extract a defecting diplomat whose presence could have sparked war in 2 hemispheres. 2 of them made it to the target. Only Ariel got out. The insertion had been clean. The intel? Not so much. The op had been compromised. The evac point bombed before they arrived. She remembered holding the diplomat's collar in one hand and a sidearm in the other, crouched behind shattered concrete for 3 hours, while foreign militia swept the block. No comms, no support, no mercy. When she got him out, when she stumbled into an Allied checkpoint 4 days later with cracked ribs and half a lung, the brass didn't know whether to give her a medal or make her disappear. So they chose the middle path. Bury the mission, smear the name, reassign the survivor. Her service record was altered. Terms like operational deviation, non-compliance, and mental fatigue appeared clinical, vague, unprovable. They called it preservation. She called it erasure. In the present, Ariel sat on the warehouse floor with grease on her fatigues, replacing springs on a jammed M4. Someone had accidentally knocked a container of lithium lubricant off the top shelf. She didn't react. Private Hall passed by with a grin. "Don't slip, ma'am." He didn't know that she'd once disarmed an ambush in the dark with nothing but a combat knife and instinct. He didn't know that her hands had stopped bleeding soldiers and started sorting bolts only because no one else could survive the truth she carried. She kept cleaning. Not the rifle. Herself. Her shame. Her silence. Her name. She wasn't looking for anything that day, just killing time. The warehouse had a back room, half forgotten, used mostly for condemned training gear and outdated field manuals. Ariel liked it there, dust muffled the silence, and no one followed. That morning, she was scanning old operations maps tagged for shredding, mostly boring stuff. Urban exercises from 2007, terrain grids for now, defunct desert posts. But one caught her eye. She froze. Not because of what it said, because of what it showed. At the bottom corner, hidden in the faded key, was a symbol. The same angular phoenix etched into her arm. Not a match the match. Every line exact. The wings jagged like shrapnel. The central core a geometric spiral wrapped in hex patterns. It wasn't decorative. It was tactical. A symbol meant to be recognized only by those who weren't supposed to speak. Her fingers trembled. This wasn't just a memory. It was evidence. She snapped a photo and did what instinct told her not to. She sent it. Same secure line, same unknown number. They still don't recognize the emblem. How long do I wait? The response came faster than she expected. Let truth build momentum. Let them chase it this time. She stared at that reply longer than she'd stared at any rifle in years. Something in her chest, not hope, not quite shifted. But momentum came at a cost. And hers kept piling up. Later that week, a group of junior soldiers followed her into the gear room, phones already recording. They called it Talk Time, their new prank series. Hey, Commander Comeback, one of them jeered. Show us that famous retreat pose again. Before she could move, one of them tipped over a bin of motor grease onto her jacket. Another fake tripped into a wall of crates she just organized, sending items cascading in chaos. They laughed, edited, hashtagged. She cleaned it up in silence. Not because she lacked the will to respond, but because she knew the fight wasn't with them. They weren't enemies, just echoes, noise bouncing off a system that taught them what to see and what to mock. From the doorway, Lieutenant Mercer stood watching. This time, he didn't walk away. But he didn't step in either. That night, he couldn't sleep. At 2:16 a.m., Mercer logged into the restricted database assigned to junior officers with temporary SOCOM clearance. He typed in fragmentary search terms. Tier Black, Ivory Gate, Emblem, Phoenix, Angular. Unassigned missions, classified recoveries, Operation Buried. Most returned dead ends. But one hit flickered in a forgotten training archive, a note about a shipment that had bypassed standard routes, flagged with a code, IG-7-1-exfil. Only one line wasn't redacted. Single operative extraction achieved under hostile fire. Operator identity withheld per protocol Echo B. He read it again and again. He clicked back to the photo on his phone, the one from the depot video, then back to the file. His hands shook. It's her. He thought about everything now, every look she'd endured, every joke she had encountered, every time she'd chosen stillness over explanation. He'd stood 5 feet from someone the world forgot on purpose. And he'd done nothing. The worst kind of mistake wasn't acting in malice. It was watching someone fall and convincing yourself it wasn't your place to catch them. Down in the depot, Ariel sat beneath a flickering bulb, rewiring a radio long past its usefulness. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. They'll know soon, be ready. She looked up at the empty doorway and whispered to no one, I've been ready for years. No one expected General Elias Harrow to show up that morning. Least of all the staff sergeant assigned to coffee duty, who spilled 2 full carafes when the old black SUV rolled into Hawthorne base without escort or warning. Harrow's reputation was legend. 4 decades in uniform. Led units in every time zone and every war worth whispering about. He hated ceremonies, distrusted clean boots, and never did inspections by the book. Which is why when he arrived unannounced, the entire base scrambled. Checkpoints were manned, barracks were vacuumed. Commanding officers barked into radios, patching together formations and staged greetings that would never happen. But Harrow wasn't interested in formations. He walked the base alone, quiet, deliberate steps. No aid, no file in hand, just a pair of sharp eyes built to detect lies, laziness, and layers of rot beneath regulation polish. He visited the motor pool, the canteen, a few training fields, stopped briefly to watch a platoon fumble a rifle disassembly drill. Then his boots found the warehouse. According to schedule, it should have been empty. But it wasn't. From the open bay door, he saw her. A woman in grease-streaked fatigues, restocking crates with quiet efficiency. She moved with precision that betrayed routine. No wasted motion, Every label aligned, every clasp sealed tight. Not standard issue warehouse sloppiness. Discipline. He watched for a full minute. She didn't notice him. Or maybe she did and just didn't care. When she reached for a top shelf case, her sleeve slipped. And that was when time changed. His breath caught mid-step. The ink. Black, angular, a phoenix, yes, but not quite. It looked coded, stylized, military grade. He'd seen it once, years ago, in a sealed SOCOM file marked Ease Only. Operation, Ivory Gate Tier Black clearance required. That symbol wasn't just classified. It was erased. He stepped forward, voice low but sharp. Where did you get that mark? She turned, instantly, with the reflex of someone who trained in combat, not clerical work. Her spine straightened. Her eyes locked onto his. No fear, just a long silent readiness. Ivory Gate, she said. 7 inserted, 1 exfiltrated. The air stilled. Even the hum of forklifts and distant drills outside the depot seemed to die out. For a beat, there was only silence then, the weight of recognition. General Harrow stared at her. Not the jacket, not the grease stains. Her. And in that moment, Hawthorne Base's forgotten ghost stopped being a rumor and became a question no one knew how to answer. General Harrow didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Lieutenant Mercer, he said calmly into his comms, I want this soldier's full personnel record, not the public file. I want access to the Black Vault. There was a beat of silence on the other end. Then Mercer's voice came back, tight with confusion. Sir, Black Vault access requires Tier 5 authorization. Which I hold, Harrow cut in. Now move. 15 minutes later, the base's nervous rhythm faltered. Word spread fast. Something was happening in the warehouse, something serious. Officers walked faster. Conversations trailed off. The clip of boots against tile got sharper. Inside the depot, Harrow stood motionless, eyes fixed on the woman the system had discarded. Ariel Voss didn't fidget. She didn't speak. She simply waited the same way she had in countless raids, ambushes, and fire lines. Calm in the eye of confusion. Mercer arrived breathless, carrying a sealed folder stamped with security bands he'd never even seen before. He handed it over. Harrow opened it, and everything changed. The file didn't lie. It couldn't. Operation Ivory Gate, an unauthorized Tier Black insertion into hostile territory to extract a diplomat whose defection could have shifted borders. 6 confirmed Kia. 1 survivor. Mission success. Classified. Operator name. Redacted. Survivor's reassignment. Cover protocol enacted. Charges. Fabricated for integrity masking. It was all there. The betrayal. The silence. The narrative that crushed a soldier's name to preserve geopolitical deniability. The ghost they'd made her into, she hadn't just lived through hell. She'd been buried alive by the very institution she bled for. Harrow looked up. And for the first time in years, there was something like grief in his eyes. You carried our silence, he said, and we let them spit on your name for it. Outside, soldiers who had mocked her began quietly slipping away from the warehouse doors. Private Hall pocketed his phone, face pale. Corporal J suddenly remembered an urgent training report. The hallway cleared with the guilty grace of those realizing they'd played a part in something unforgivable. Inside, Mercer stood stiff beside her. I saw what they did, he said, voice thin. I should have said something. I should have asked more questions. Harrow turned sharply toward him. You should have believed a fellow soldier, he said coldly. All of you should have. By nightfall, the video of Ariel being humiliated in the gear room had made its way to veteran networks, military advocates, and congressional oversight groups. The storm broke quickly. A hero had been hidden, and the world was watching. But for Ariel, Vindication didn't feel like a victory. She stood quietly in the depot long after the others had gone, fingers tracing the scar on her left wrist, the one no one had asked about, not once, in 2 years. Because even truth, when finally told, comes far too late for some wounds. The ceremony wasn't on the books. No announcements, no camera crews, no dress uniforms, just a closed-door briefing room usually reserved for war games and threat simulations. But today, it was for one woman. Major Ariel Voss stood at attention in a uniform she hadn't worn in 2 years. Reissued, pressed, her nameplate still a little crooked, like even the system wasn't sure she existed again. Across the table sat General Elias Harrow, flanked by 2 observers from Military Ethics Command and 1 from the Defense Oversight Board. The room was silent except for the steady hum of the fluorescent lights and the crisp rustle of paper in Harrow's hand. He cleared his throat. "This institution failed you, Major." Her eyes did not flinch. "You executed one of the most dangerous missions on record. You saved a diplomat whose name cannot be spoken aloud. You crossed hostile territory on foot with no air support and no backup. And when you returned, we let the world believe you had failed." He paused, eyes narrowing with weight. "Because to tell the truth meant admitting a secret we were not brave enough to own." There were no decorations in the room, no medals laid out, no folded flags, just a truth long overdue. Lieutenant Cole Mercer stood along the wall, spine stiff, fists clenched at his sides. He had asked to speak. Harrow had hesitated but allowed it. He stepped forward, voice low and uneven. "Major Voss, I watched what they did to you. In that warehouse, in the cafeteria, in the barracks, and I said nothing. I laughed behind closed doors. I didn't know what was true, so I went along with what was easy." His voice cracked. "I failed you. As an officer. As a man." Ariel looked at him, long and even. She studied him not like a superior, not like a victim either, but like someone weighing the weight of another person's regret. Then she spoke. "I don't need your guilt, Lieutenant. I need you to remember." He nodded slowly. And in that nod, something shifted in him. A spine steeled by failure. General Harrow rose. "We are reinstating your service record in full. Your rank, your commendations, including the Defense Superior Service Medal and the Bronze Star with Valor retroactively and without appeal. We cannot restore the years stolen, but we can correct the lie." He laid the updated documents before her. Ariel stepped forward, signed them with calm fingers. The silence afterward was heavier than the war room had ever held. Outside the briefing room, the ripple had become a wave. Veterans groups were demanding an inquiry. News outlets, even without names, caught wind of a buried tear-black op. Public pressure mounted. Hashtags swarmed. The ghost was real. Honor the buried. Phoenix rises. But Ariel didn't participate. She didn't grant interviews, didn't post, didn't even respond to the messages flooding the anonymous inbox tied to her service number. Because for her, the point had never been public redemption. It had always been about the quiet. A week later, General Harrow called her into his office, this time with a request. "SOCOM wants you back," he said. "They're ready to bring you into an advisory role. Quiet, high level. You'd be shaping doctrine, training the next line of deep ops." Ariel shook her head before he could finish. "I appreciate it, sir," she said. "But I've spent 2 years knowing what it feels like to be left behind. I think there are soldiers out there who need someone who understands that, not from theory, from scars." He studied her, the way only a soldier of his age could, with quiet awe, respect edged with regret. "Where will you go?" "Somewhere I'm needed." By the end of that month, Ariel had disappeared again, but not into Black Ops. Instead, she resurfaced on a small VA-supported program site in the Rockies. The Quiet Range, they called it a transition center for special operations veterans discharged under ambiguous or classified circumstances. No advertising, no website, just coordinates shared among whisper networks, coin flips, and long-traveled hands. Inside, there were no ranks, no formalities, just warmth, silence, firelight, and one woman with a mark on her arm that no one asked about because those who arrived already understood. One cold evening, a new arrival stepped onto the grounds. A young woman, mid-20s, hard eyes, still standing tall, but you could see the weight in her posture like armor she couldn't remove. She sat across from Ariel near the fire pit and said, simply, "They rewrote my file." Ariel didn't respond, just pulled back her sleeve. The girl stared at the symbol, a geometric phoenix framed in steel black lines. Her breath caught. She didn't ask what it meant. She just nodded, slowly. "You're real." "I am," Ariel said. "And so are you." That night, as the wind picked up and the stars hardened above them, Mercer sent her a final message. They're forming a new doctrine program, built on your story. I've been asked to lead it. Her reply came minutes later. Don't lead it with guilt. Lead it with memory. And as the last embers of the fire glowed beneath mountain sky, Ariel Voss looked around at the circle, forming again the quiet ones, the discarded ones, the shadows the system once denied. This time, they had a place to speak. Or not. Either way, they were home. The quiet range didn't appear on any official registry. There were no brochures, no online presence, no flags flapping outside. Just a single weather-worn gate at the edge of a Colorado ridge, marked only by a blackened iron emblem, a phoenix folded into geometric lines. Some came by referral, others by instinct. Every visitor had one thing in common. They carried stories the world wasn't allowed to hear. Ariel Voss never asked them to explain. She didn't take names, only nods. Didn't request forms, only silence. And when they sat by the fire, the real one, built in the pit behind the converted barracks, the quiet was not absence. It was permission. Permission to not be okay. The veterans who arrived were like her, not broken, but bent from years in the dark. Operators disavowed for missions too classified to admit. Medics who watched friends die with no record of the battle. Interrogation officers who never fired a weapon but still dreamed in shrapnel. Some came with scars, others carried none, at least not where anyone could see. And some came in silence, like the Navy SEAL who sat on the porch for 3 days before speaking a single word. Ariel sat beside him every morning, said nothing, left black coffee in an extra blanket. On the 4th day, he simply said, "I thought it was just me." She didn't respond, just pulled up her sleeve and let the mark answer for her. Word of the quiet range spread not through headlines or hashtags, but through coded emails and dry nods at VA clinics, brief side glances at supply stations, wordless gestures between ghosts, and slowly, they arrived. A Delta Force sniper who hadn't slept through the night in 2 years. A drone analyst discharged under mental unfitness after refusing to approve a civilian strike. A comms tech who cracked a terrorist cell and was punished for knowing what she wasn't cleared to know. Each one found the same rhythm. Work in the morning, stillness in the afternoon, stories if shared by firelight. There were no rules at the pit, only one truth. You were believed here. Meanwhile, far from the mountains, something began to shift. Lieutenant Cole Mercer, now newly promoted to lieutenant colonel, took a post few others wanted, director of ethics training at the Joint Special Operations School in Quantico. His first act wasn't to rewrite the manuals. It was to build a new course from scratch. The syllabus bore no hero worship, no war stories sanitized into doctrine, no lecture slides titled How to Lead. Instead, it began with a blank page and a question written in sharp black text. Have you ever stood silent while someone was crushed? The course was mandatory. The room always went quiet at the first session. Mercer opened each class with the same line. This course exists because we failed. We failed to ask questions. We failed to believe what didn't come with rank. We failed to recognize strength that didn't scream. He never used her name. Not once. But the mark was on every slide, stylized into the curriculum seal. The angular phoenix, the black ink design Ariel never meant for anyone to see. It had become more than a symbol. It had become a reckoning. Back in Colorado, letters began arriving. Not from media, from soldiers. Typed, scrawled, neatly printed. Some apologizing, some confessing, some just saying thank you. Ariel read them quietly, then stored them in a metal box beneath her bunk. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. But one letter gave her pause. It came from Corporal James Hall, the young soldier who'd once laughed the loudest at her grease-stained silence. His handwriting was careful, intentional, honest. Major Voss, I once called you washed up. I once filmed you for laughs. I thought strength looked loud, aggressive, unbreakable. But you didn't break. You held the line while people like me turned away. Your story changed how I see everything. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed you to know I see you now. She didn't write back. But that night, she slipped the letter into the fire pit herself. Watched it burn. Not as erasure, as closure. Winter came early that year. The wind howled against the wooden siding of the range, and the night stretched long. Ariel walked the perimeter as always, quiet boots in soft snow, her hand brushing the iron railing by reflex. She paused by the gate. The old sign there was weather-worn now, paint chipping. She reached out and traced the emblem with a gloved finger. It hadn't faded. Not even after everything. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a secure line. Message from General Harrow, now retired. Congressional subcommittee hearing next month. Testimony could change how internal justice is handled. They need your voice. She stared at the screen. Then typed, "Let the fire speak. Let the others be heard." She put the phone away, stepped back inside. The fire pit crackled behind her. Inside, a new arrival was unpacking a duffel. Young, reserved, wary. Ariel offered him no words, just a nod, a gesture toward the firelight and space. That was all some people needed. Not a savior. Just proof they weren't alone anymore. A year passed. No headlines, no documentaries, just steady change, slow, almost invisible, but real. The Department of Defense quietly launched Project Silent Emblem, a systemic review of personnel files tied to Black Ops, with a focus on misclassified disciplinary actions. Old files reopened. Names long buried began to reappear in cleared pages. Not everyone accepted it. Reform always met resistance. But some things, once seen, couldn't be unseen. At the Joint Special Operations School, the new training cohort gathered under early morning light. Their uniforms were crisp. Their eyes were green, hungry. They expected war stories. Instead, Lieutenant Colonel Mercer stood before them with nothing but a screen showing a single symbol. A black phoenix, wings cut sharp by angles. "This emblem once marked a soldier no one believed," he began. "She didn't protest. She didn't yell. She endured. When you graduate, you'll wear rank. Some of you will carry power, but power is nothing without memory." He paused. "Remember the quiet ones." Across the country, in the Rockies, snow had begun to melt. Pine needles peeked through frost. The quiet range stirred from its winter sleep. Ariel walked the same perimeter she always did, boots pressed into soft mud, rifle slung out of habit, not necessity. She wasn't on patrol. Not anymore. But old instincts never died. They just softened. She paused near the fire pit. The logs were glowing low, nearly ash. The sunrise hit the stones just right, the mountain behind her caught in blue and gold haze. And in that light, the tattoo on her arm shimmered. It wasn't just ink anymore. It had become something else. A marker. A map. A memory that couldn't be silenced. She heard laughter from the main hall, new arrivals unloading gear, boots stomping on old wood. One called out, "Coffee strong today!" Another voice chimed in, "Must be her doing." She smiled. They didn't mean it cruelly. Not like before. It was inclusion now. Recognition. Respect not for the medals, but for the gravity she carried without needing to speak. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A final message from Harrow. "A new center's being built. DC wants to name it after you." She didn't respond. She simply turned her phone off. Some stories were never meant for granite or plaques. Some belonged to the quiet places, to fire pits and walking trails, to moments when a trembling soldier sat across from her, didn't know what to say, and simply needed someone who understood. The phoenix on her arm caught one last glint of morning light as she headed back inside. It didn't blaze. It didn't glow. But it was there, steady, silent, unbroken. Like her. What happened to Major Ariel Voss isn't just a military story, it's a mirror. A mirror for every workplace, every institution, every moment where someone was written off without a second glance, where silence was mistaken for guilt, where dignity was buried under rumor, and no one stood up to ask why. Her story reminds us that the strongest people aren't always loud, that some heroes walk through humiliation with their heads down, not because they're ashamed, but because they're carrying more than we'll ever understand. It's a lesson in judgment, in presence, in the power of one person to hold the line for years, quietly, with no recognition, until someone finally chooses to look deeper. So the next time you see someone left behind, ask yourself, are you the one who speaks up or the one who watches in silence? If this story moved, you take a second to subscribe. We're building a space where untold truths matter. And in the comments below, we want to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed quiet strength go unrecognized? Your story might be the one someone needs to read today.